All right, so we are live. So thank you guys for joining me for our September listening club. We listened to Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks, which was actually a pick from our member Tim, who will be joining us shortly. And I can't wait for that because I'm really looking forward to discussing this with him. He has a lot of opinions. I'd feel really bad if he wasn't here. But just for my general over housekeeping that I usually do, um, this is one of our monthly clubs. We have a monthly listening club as well as a monthly movie club. Our movie club will actually be meeting this coming Monday at 7 p.m. So you guys can join us online for that. We also have a quarterly book club that we read a book and talk about it every 3 months. We are reading Love in the Time of Cholera, and we will be discussing it at the end of next month. So you still have some time to catch up and read it if you'd like to join us for that discussion. I only let a few people on the call for videos, but if you are watching it live, you are always more than welcome to state a comment or respond to us, and we will see that live and be able to respond to you. If you're watching it after the fact, then you can still comment on it and we'll still see it. And I would love to discuss it with you. That's why I run these clubs. If you do want to join us for the calls, you can actually ask about that on Facebook, where I announce these on the first of every month. So I put the link to our Facebook group on the screen. We don't just do these clubs there. We are an entire group of creatives talking about the problems dealing with being creative and sharing our work and all of that. If you're in the Los Angeles area, we have meetups. We have a weekly call on Saturdays that are always a lot of fun. And if you like what we do and you'd like to support us, we have a Patreon where you can support us for as little as $2 a month. Right now, everything that we offer is free to the public and free through our Facebook group. But we appreciate any support that you can provide. So get on over to Patreon.
Yeah, we don't have perks yet, but we plan to in the future. So it would really just be showing us your love, which we appreciate.
Before we get started, I'm going to apologize. I did not have time to eat before getting on this call, so I will be eating. So if there are long periods of silence or you see me bend down, that is what's happening.
No problem.
Oh, I think we clicked the button at the same time.
Hi, Tim.
Hey.
You joined at just the right time because we are getting ready to talk about it. So I'm guessing I know the answer for Tim, but Beckett, have you listened to this album before?
No, I've heard a couple of these songs before, but I've never listened. I've never purposely listened to Bob Dylan before ever. So
that's fair. I feel like I also didn't. Like it was always happenstance or like, yeah. There was an entire class when I was in music school on Bob Dylan, and I did not take that class. But I knew this album existed. I just never sat down and listened to it. And boy, oh boy, do you really have to sit down and listen to Bob Dylan. It's not something that, I mean, it's nice to have on in the background and it's very pleasant to listen to, but it's like, specifically this album is very storytelling and very in the lyrics and very, very much like a thinker. What was your favorite song?
me?
Either of you.
I'm busy fucking around with my fan, so yeah, Beckett, if you could step up first.
Hey, no swearing. We're on YouTube.
Oh, no.
Kidding. Whatever.
We're not monetized.
We're not monetized, so it doesn't really matter. Let me see. I have to remind myself. I like Tangled Up in Blue a lot. I think that might be my favorite.
My favorite is Buckets of Rain, but that's mostly because it feels like Savasana after this album. Like this album that is all turmoil and like all of these emotions and like a lot of being torn up and just like kind of desperation, and then you have Buckets of Rain, which is just a nice change. Like it did feel like I got like all all of the feelings of the rest of it, and then I just got to release it at the end with it. So I think I have to give Buckets of Rain my favorite just because of that.
There are so many songs that I like on this album. Tangled Up in Blue, and You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go, Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts, If You See Her Say Hello, and Shelter from the Storm. But if you put a gun to my head and asked me to pick a favorite, it would be Simple Twist of Fate. There's things about that lyric I think that I identify with. There's a couple lyrics on this album that I identify with, but Simple Twist of Fate, there's just something about those lyrics and his delivery and how it's just guitar and bass. It's actually the only Bob Dylan tune that I learned to play. I know both the guitar part and the bass part, and I can croak it fairly well also, which should, demonstrate how much I'm dedicated to that particular tune.
I loved the songs that were just like him and bass. Like it was just him playing, like singing, playing guitar, like occasionally like a harmonica came in for a little bit, but it was very clearly just him and then bass, which was either Billy Peterson or Tony Brown, depending on the track.
Right.
I want to give props to this album for being the only album that we've listened to where every single song has its own entry on Wikipedia.
I was thinking about you when I saw that.
Yeah.
And for I think for all the Bob Dylan albums on Wikipedia, every song has a Wikipedia page, not unlike the Beatles.
Yeah. Boy, was it a lot to go through every single one of these. Like... reading with like the lyrics and then going back through. I still didn't do as much of a deep dive as I really think was necessary for this. I probably should have taken the Bob Dylan course when I was in college, is what I learned.
Well, I mean, to do the deep dive, what you have to do is get all the official bootlegs and more blood on the tracks, all the stuff that wasn't released from the two separate studio dates to kind of compare.
Which actually is something that I want to talk about, is the fact that this is two different studios, because my understanding is the entire album was recorded in New York City. Mm-hmm. And then I don't think it was Bob Dylan. I think it was his brother convinced him that some of the songs needed to sound differently. And so without talking to his label, he flew out to Minneapolis and re-recorded a bunch of the songs and then put them on the album without telling his label.
They had actually already printed up the album sleeves with the credits and everything, and they were ready to roll on it. And it wasn't just his brother, but I think his brother was the last person he asked about his opinion. Yeah. So two different bands on this album, which I think, aside from the autobiographical components on it, is maybe the least interesting thing about the album, but that's just because I think the lyrics are just so devastatingly good on this album and the following album, Desire, as well. Just remarkable songwriting.
I couldn't stop laughing at because every single descriptor of every of these is like, it's autobiographical, and like every single time Bob Dylan talks about it, he's like, it's not. And it's so clearly autobiographical. Like everyone around him is like, this is very clearly discussing this relationship. I mean, even Tangled Up in Blue, he just like describes how he met his wife, who he was separating, like in detail. And he's like, no. But he also changes the lyrics to the song as he goes on in his life. Like as he performs later on, he changes like the lyrics to these songs like a lot. But it made me laugh how many times I read the phrase, Bob Dylan says that this is not based on his life and was just him storytelling based on characters he made up.
Even Jacob famously said, "Yeah, I listened to this album and it's my parents talking."
Yeah.
But again, I really believe that that it's beside the point, just because the songwriting is so good, and a lot of the feelings, um, it's definitely written from a man's point of view, so I could understand why some women might be uncomfortable with some of the things going on in the album. But I think there are universal emotions surrounding relationships, and stuff like that in the album that I just think can say something to pretty much everybody.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I wasn't paying that close attention to the lyrics. Like I would kind of catch some here and there, but I mean, I work so hard. So I was multitasking while I was listening to this. It was difficult to, really pay attention in depth. But a lot of Bob Dylan songs sound the same to me. So it's hard to differentiate.
I think that's absolutely fair if you're not paying attention to them, which, to be honest, I also didn't pay attention to Bob Dylan. And the way that he does phrasing is so interesting that, like, even not paying attention to his lyrics, I always know a Bob Dylan lyric just based on the way that the phrasing is done and the way that it rhythmically is, like, placed into it.
That's fair because a lot of his like hits or like the tonal hits, the beats don't match up the way I anticipate lyrically a song should. So that's interesting. It was a little bit what's the word? Like disorienting listening to.
And a lot of times he doesn't rhyme. Half of his tunes he does his rhymes, half of them he doesn't. Sometimes he'll rhyme some of the lyrics, and other times he won't. And then he'll rhyme and not rhyme other lyrics. About them sounding the same. So in the New York session, he was playing open D tuning with a capo on it to make it in E. So all these songs were originally done in New York City in the same key. It was only when he went to Minneapolis to re-record them, he decided to change certain tunes. Most famously, "Idiot Wind," which I think he took up. I think he might have taken up a whole major third. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, four half steps up. So yeah. So I would imagine I've never gone and listened to the outtakes because I think I've listened to some of them and I'm like, yeah, I'd rather listen to the released cuts. But I think that's why a lot of people think there's a sound-alike quality to a lot of the tunes because they were all written in E originally.
Was that done for ease of playing, or was it done?
It's a Bob Dylan thing. I think it comes from his folk days. He knows how to play, and he's all this. I read a book by a critic who talked extensively about the sessions, and all the musicians say that he knows music very well. He's not an illiterate folkie. He knows how to move between key centers and do different things with chords. I think he just this is how he hears those songs. Interesting. One of my other Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts is such a standard country song. The progression and his phrasing, and the musicians, they play it just like a country tune. And yet it's Bob Dylan's lyrics, which is what just makes it so different.
The only song on the album that's probably not autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
And is really good storytelling. Complete story, kind of open-ended at the end. You could make a short film based on that song.
And it's like 15 verses or something. And
it's very folk layout where like it's just the same thing, but the story is progressing through it.
That also is, if I'm being honest, Bob Dylan is not my cup of tea. Like there are a few songs that I enjoy, but like it's really, I don't know. I just, the whole like telling a story start to finish without any recognizable repetition as far as a verse or something like that is not, or a chorus rather. Sorry, I'm drinking. I have had a week.
Oh, I'm sorry, Beckett.
It's
You should
also
never leave
interesting.
alone, so let me get my booze too.
I also have those.
Nice.
It doesn't
Yeah,
look like
and
it,
I
but this
also
is a
didn't
mojito.
have. I also didn't have time to eat beforehand, so it's getting to me already, which is good.
It's interesting to bring up like that all of his songs kind of like, and it's not your cup of tea, because this album was pretty critically acclaimed, but like leading up to this album, there was pretty mixed reviews out on Bob Dylan. Like you had people who really liked his stuff and people that really disliked his stuff, and like critics like were pretty split down. Like he was a very divisive kind of musician before this in terms of what people liked. I never got the vibe that Bob Dylan ever cared about any of this. He just kind of kept keeping on, and I think the fact that he became like as popular as he did was kind of beside the point in terms of like his music writing. But yeah, people were pretty split on how they felt about him and his music prior to this album.
Yeah, I know nothing about Bob Dylan, so this is interesting.
Well, there was recently a biopic that came out about him.
I know that. I didn't watch it.
I
I'm
also did not
I'm
watch
not a Dylan
it.
fan, so
For as much as I go on and on about this album, I'm certainly not, a big Dylan stan. Before I heard this album, there were cuts. I listened to Blonde on Blonde maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and Highway 61 Revisited maybe twice a year. This album I probably listened to, every 6 weeks or so. There was something about this album that I connected with in a way that his other material I don't. And the same thing with Desire, the album that follows this one, which is almost of a piece with this album.
You listen to music so much more than I do.
I
Because
find that
every time that we have one of these discussions, you're like, I listen to this album every 6 weeks.
I do have my touchstones that I go, too often.
Yeah, I a lot of this Wikipedia page on my end is me clicking through the links, and I still feel like I barely scratched the surface on Bob Dylan. And I don't exactly know where to start, if I'm being completely honest.
is he the most prolific musician or group we've covered so far?
He's almost certainly the most prolific songwriter. I mean, we haven't even. I think we haven't even put a dent in the songs that he has written down somewhere and has never recorded.
I mean, we also did the Beatles, who I think would probably be the most prolific.
You think so? More than Bob Dylan?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I mean, the musicians that he's worked with and his friends talk about how he's just always writing. He's always writing. I think he has a journal with him that he's always writing.
I mean,
songs.
to find this album specifically on YouTube Music, I had to scroll for like 10 minutes.
I actually don't know how many he has. I think the only one that would come close is probably like maybe Elvis Presley, because he has all of the soundtracks. But I don't know if you count that.
Presley didn't write most of his material.
Yes. So I think in terms of songwriters, he definitely is. Bob Dylan definitely is the most prolific.
Yeah.
I would, if you want to, I'm not going to say dig deeper in Dylan, but what I would recommend to most people to get a sense of what Dylan is really about, I would say watch Marty Scorsese's concert doc of the Rolling Thunder Review, which came out about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. That's just an incredible experience. My favorite moment, interestingly enough, isn't even the Dylan performances, which are fantastic. There's a little party where they're at, I think they're all at David Crosby's house or something. And Joni Mitchell is there, and she's been working on Hajira, which is, so it's not released yet. And she does Coyote, which is the first track on Hajira, just her strumming a guitar with Bob Dylan sitting next to her, and people like David Crosby and these other cats standing around. And it's such a spectacular experience to see Joni just casually singing one of these tunes, particularly one that would be so well developed instrumentally by the time she went in the studio with it.
Yeah, it's so whenever we like go back and like watch things like that, it's always so interesting to me, like how interconnected the music community is at like this time frame, especially where just like you have one album and all the people on it were playing on like another thing, or you have live shows where it is Joni Mitchell just playing casually with Bob Dylan sitting next to her. I mean, we also read Easy Rider Raging Bull, and it was kind of had the same vibe about like just the way that like the industry worked at the time and how interconnected everybody was.
Yeah.
And also apparently nobody in any industry like cared at all what anybody thought.
I mean, it's still kind of like that to an extent. Definitely not as interdependent as it used to be. But man, what I would give to sit in these rooms just creating with other artists.
So going back to these him saying that this has nothing to do with his personal life, I literally just read the line that in his 2004 memoir, he says these are inspired by the short stories of Chekhov. And I've read a lot of Chekhov short stories, and I cannot for the life of me figure out what he's referring to.
I don't know that I've heard that particular quote. What I hear are his poetic influences, like Verlaine, and who's the other one that I was thinking of? I can't even. I mean, he even name checks them in one of the songs here. He is so well read. It's kind of stunning. I don't know how he managed to read so many things and write all the songs that he was writing, simultaneously. It's kind of amazing. He's a very different mind. I wish I was 1/10 as creative as he is.
Yeah, I wanted to ask him because you were very, very excited to pick this album. Was it just for the songwriting and lyricism of it, the poeticness of the writing?
I think, and perhaps I'm wrong on this. I think that if you're going to do Dylan, it's a great album to do because I think it's the most accessible of his albums. I think the early folk albums are kind of, if you're not a folkie, they're kind of hard to get into. And Blonde on Blonde and Highway 61 tend to shoot off all over the place in terms of subject matter and sound. I think for me, this album is the most accessible because I think production wise and songwriting and performance wise, it's the most solid of all his albums, where everything just seems to come together. It's to me, it's a perfect album.
It's kind of an like unintentional concept album.
Sure. Okay.
Just in the sense of like all of these songs kind of have the same, they're all dealing with a breakup. It's definitely a breakup album. which is part of the reason why I think Buckets of Rain is just such an interesting song on it. Which apparently he only played the song once live, which because all of them have the same like coherent story about the end of a relationship or like why the relationship didn't work out. And I'm not sure about the rest of his albums and if they're this coherent in like the entire album has this entire message about them, or if it is more song based.
I think to the extent that you view it as an autobiographical album, I think, yeah, they're more, I mean, Desire, which follows this one, is not as much relationship based. I think he exercised his demons perhaps in this album, and then carried on the quality of the songwriting and the production into Desire, so that you get something that's consistent sound-wise with this album, but a little bit different lyrically and thematically.
Bringing up the thing that Beckett was talking about earlier, where like the way that his phrases like don't quite match what you think that the phrases are supposed to sound like, I need to go through and look up the stuff that's attached to Idiot Wind, which was actually based on a saying by his like painting teacher that he was studying with at the time.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that he was studying and that were breaking outside of lines, and a lot of this album has to do with like weirdness with time. Like, I think, is it Simple Twist of Fate that like randomly switches from third person to first person as you're listening to it? And like all of these songs like don't exactly like, they're telling a story but not quite in a timeline. It's almost has more of a vibe feeling about it, and like a lot of it has to do with playing with time.
I think with Simple Twist of Fate, it's almost like a movie. When I listen to that song, I see a movie in my head. And so you have things that are happening simultaneously, like when he wakes up to the empty bed, but you've already seen her, she's already left. And while he's waking up, you know, she's already on the street, and, you know, she drops the coin in the cup of the blind man. You know, there's Tangled Up in Blue, I think, jumps around as well. And he jumps around in terms of first person and third person and second person to a large extent as well. So I wouldn't want to commit to saying which song specifically he does that stuff with time, but I think Tangled Up in Blue, I think, does some of that as well. But I just happen to know Simple Twist of Fate so well, so that I know, and because I think of it like a movie, I always see the movie playing in my head when I listen to it. I kind of get that. And I think he was watching a lot of the French New Wave directors around the time he made this album. I could be wrong about that, but I want to say that I read that somewhere.
That would not surprise me in the slightest. So many, many months ago, we listened to Thundercat, and this is where my brain went and the connections in my brain went. But Thundercat's album that we listened to kind of felt like a guy writing in his journal at the end of the day. And this also feels like a guy writing in his journal at the end of the day, but like he keeps going off on tangents a little bit and like making connections. Like I just made a connection between this and Thundercat, and so now we're talking like, and it just like feels like that. Like he's just writing these sentences down, and then wherever the next sentence takes him, and they might not be related at all.
Yeah. I love that about him, because that makes us work a little bit, because we're trying to make that connection. Those of us who are paying attention to the lyrics and like, where the fuck did that come from? And you know, well, something in Bob Dylan's head went that way. That's where it came from.
I can't imagine a movie to any of these songs except for Jack of Hearts. Uh, like they feel like a man talking to himself while looking out a window, and like we just happen to be there hearing him.
Stream of consciousness.
Yes, very, very much so. Which is also why there's like nothing to really latch onto in any of these songs. Like they just kind of all continue.
Oh, do you really feel that way? It's because I've listened to the album so many times that I feel there's lots of stuff to latch on. Although when I'm listening to it, there are occasions when he'll finish a stanza and he'll go into the next stanza. I'm like, what? Wait, what? How? What are we doing here now?
He tends to repeat like the last, like a line at the end of all of his stanzas, but like there's not like a chorus to any of these songs. And I think that's more of what I mean when I say there's nothing to latch onto. If you asked me to like call up what a song sounds like in my head, I'm not sure if I could do it. I don't think I could sing any of these songs back to you, and I would have to listen to the album many, many times over before I would be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think if you go
honestly,
back to
anytime you think of Bob Dylan, it's just "Wish You Were Here." That's the only song I hear in my head, which is not on this album. So.
Yeah, if you listen to he's at this point, from my perspective, just on the earlier stuff that I have listened to, which again is mostly Blonde on Blonde and Highway 61 Revisited. He was a much more traditional songwriter at that point. His songs were, it's not that he didn't venture off into, non-traditional songwriting, but if you look at his hits, they're all very much in traditional form with verses and chorus. Rainy Day Women, and Like a Rolling Stone. But I think by the time you get to this album, which is 10 years later, he's developed into Dylan. His songs are not of anybody else's influence. They're all Dylan in his own unique way.
I read two really interesting things back to back that now I have to bring up to you guys. The first is that most of the time it seems like there are two different cover albums of this album in their entirety. Mary Lee's Corvette did an entire cover of it in 2002, and Ryan Adams did one in 2022, which I think is probably the most amount of cover albums I've seen of just an entire album that was done. But also there's a line here that just says, in 2018, it was announced that the film adaptation of the album was in pre-production under the direction of Luca Guadagnino. I can't pronounce that.
Yeah.
Guadagnino. Who...
Seems like an odd project for him.
It does seem like an odd project for him.
I'd be very curious to see that screenplay.
But it's also interesting to me because he does a lot of work with Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah. Talk about, this could be Bob Dylan's kid or grandkid.
Yeah, who did A Complete Unknown.
Yeah.
Which
I was going to say,
didn't he
play him in the movie?
Yeah. But with a different director, so that's not the project. Also, it's not a movie based on the album. So now I have a lot of questions about like what's happening in this production thing that's going on.
I hadn't heard about that.
I had also, again, this was a throwaway line in the middle of this article about influences.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, incredibly influential album. Kind of insane how I feel like I simultaneously know a lot about Bob Dylan and know nothing about Bob Dylan. Like, I've known the name my entire life and never stopped to think about it.
Same.
I'm not
And
sure Bob Dylan is knowable.
I think that's fair, especially after listening to a couple of his albums.
Now
I
that
think
I'm
just the autobiographical, no, it's not.
now that I'm looking at the discography, I don't know that the song I don't know the title of the song I'm thinking of.
Again, that feels fair for Bob Dylan.
It's interesting that I was thinking about it, and it's interesting that I am attracted to what I think are the simpler songs in this album, more so than the more complex songs. I mean, I like every track on here, but, you know, Simple Twist of Fate and Shelter from the Storm, you know, are just so very, they're just these very not heavily produced songs with just this vivid imagery. You know, Shelter from the Storm reminds me a lot of the Robbie Robertson tune with the band, The Weight. There's something about the themes in that reminds me of the themes in The Weight. And I don't know, yeah. But at the same time, I mean, I do like the more produced tunes, like Tangled Up in Blue. Tangled Up in Blue is such a wonderful opener. It's a perfect tune to open this particular album. I think Dylan had a lot of control over how his albums, you know, what was the artwork and the sequence of the songs. And, you know, I mean, this album is sequenced very well, although I would have moved Simple Twist of Fate to the third track, and I would have put something else in the second place because it seems so abrupt coming after Tangled Up in Blue.
You're muted, Rebecca.
Oh, I thought she was just talking to herself.
Yeah, I can do two things. I keep muting myself so that you don't hear me eating, and then I forget because I just never click it again. A part of me wishes that like side one was all Minneapolis and side two was all New York. But I do think that mixing them up and changing them does change the dynamic of it. But I do feel like we needed like a smaller or like a more toned down Minneapolis song to follow up Tangled Up in Blue, because I do agree with you. That being said, I like the New York City songs a lot more. I like the just him and bass and very, very pared down. I like that a lot more. And I think I might disagree with his brother that the songs need it to be. I might go through and like listen to the beach sides or like the New York City versions of a lot of these songs, because I do like the New York City songs a lot better.
Yeah, all those tracks are out there and have been released on either one of the bootleg series or in one of the. I mean, there were multiple Blood on the Tracks versions released over the last 10, 15 years. One is called More Blood on the Tracks.
It's More Blood, More Tracks.
Oh, More Blood, More Tracks. Okay. And then there's one of the bootleg series, which isn't just Blood on the Tracks, but it's a variety of tunes that he recorded at around that time, which means it features mostly Blood on the Tracks, but it has other tunes. And I have that somewhere, but I think I listened to it once and I haven't revisited it, but maybe I will. The interesting thing, I was reading, Andy Gill is the name of the critic who wrote the book that I read. So there was an actual band. It was Eric something or other and Deliverance was the name of the band that went in for the original session in New York. And then I think Dylan fired everybody but the bass player, kept the bass player, and brought in more musicians. This is still in New York, then I don't know if he re-recorded the. I don't remember if he re-recorded the whole album or he just recorded certain tracks. So the credits have always been very difficult, and it was for years nobody knew who the Minneapolis musicians were. They were promised credit on the second printing, and then that credit never came about. The credits for the New York musicians stayed on the album, and I still don't think it's been corrected, except maybe in the bootleg series material.
Sorry, I was going back through because I actually wrote notes on the artwork and packaging.
Mhm.
But it seems like liner notes were written and then removed. So there is like, it wasn't on the first one, and then they put in more liner notes, and then Columbia Records removed them for the later 1975 pressings.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that was just out of anger about the fact that he went to Minneapolis in the first place. And like a weird retaliation. But it seems like that's probably what happened, was they corrected it, and then Columbia Records was like, absolutely not, and put it back.
My understanding, Andy Gill goes over this in his book, he had left Columbia and came back to Columbia. And of course, Columbia was not happy that he had left Columbia. And so there was a lot of bad blood there because he came back. Andy Gill portrays it as they were so thrilled to have Dylan back that they would have done anything for him. So, but I don't know, who knows what the truth of that is.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that are really interesting. But I do want to talk about the album cover because it's just such a interesting image.
He looks more like Al Cooper here than he does like Bob Dylan. I mean, I look at that and I see Al Cooper more than I see Bob Dylan.
The interesting thing about this is it's not a painting, it's a heavily edited photograph.
Interesting.
It was done by a man named Paul Till. It was actually a concert photo that he took of him in Toronto in 1974. And then he solarized it while he was developing the photo, and then hand colored certain parts of it with watercolors. So I guess to a certain extent it was painted. But I love the idea that this was just a concert photo that some guy took, and then it was like filters.
Because it's a perfect profile.
Yeah, it's a great image.
Yeah.
I love the design of this cover. I like the way that like he's like looking towards the title. It's just very visually appealing and instantly recognizable. It also doesn't quite feel like a folk album at all looking at it. Like if you showed me this album, I would assume it's like a classical pianist.
Oh, yeah.
Or something.
I mean, the typeface choice.
Yes.
And where it sits on the banner. I mean, it's very minimalist, and the color choices. It's I talk about it being a perfect album. It's also a perfect album cover. And what a great title! There's so much to read into that title.
Yeah, and I usually ask this, and I completely forgot. So I'm really happy that you brought that up, because none of the albums on the track are called Blood on the Tracks. So
it doesn't appear in the lyrics either.
It doesn't. Yeah. So that's more of the naming of the album, and it's so evocative and really shows you how much of himself he put into these tracks, despite saying that they're based on other things and stories he made up. And it's really the perfect like analogy for this.
It also evokes the image of train tracks, obviously, and going, referencing the fact that Bob Dylan was such a blue collar musician.
And Road Warrior.
Yeah.
He was putting his buzz off.
I'm going back through some of his other.
I just love the metaphorical, sense of the title. That blood on the tracks. I just that to me is in it. Even if it had no other meanings, if it only had that one, would be enough to make it a brilliant title.
Yeah, I didn't even connect. Oh yeah, tracks like music tracks. Like that didn't even occur to me.
Yeah. Now, if you take a look, I don't know if you can pull it up, Rebecca, but if you look at the cover for Desire, it's like 180 degrees from this.
I can pull it up on my screen. I can't pull it up on the chart itself.
Well,
but yes,
those of you who are watching, pull it up on your web browser.
Yeah, Desire looks like a photo that your friend who wants to be a photographer takes.
Who shot that cover?
Sorry, I don't have this information on hand.
Ken Regan was the official photographer for Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Review tour.
So the cover photography for Desire was done by somebody named Ruth Bernal.
Oh, that's interesting. That's of course AI is wrong.
At least that's what it says in the technical personnel.
And that
cover photography by Ruth Bernal.
That probably came off the album, so that's probably the correct credit, because AI also notes that Ken Regan was the tour photographer for the Rolling Thunder Review.
It says that Ken Regan did the cover art, but does that mean he put a square on it? Like,
who the fuck knows?
But this is a hard switch, and it's very, very different from like his album before as well. Not Before the Flood, but Planet Waves.
Yeah, Planet Waves.
Which looks like you're about to see a punk band in an underground club. Like these album covers are all over the place.
Yeah. Much as Dylan seems to be.
Yeah, a part of me wants to. I want to do a better deep dive into Bob Dylan because I'm just fascinated by this journey he seems to go on. None of these feel like they're the same person. I mean, we just did Aphex Twin, and Aphex Twin's covers kind of like feel like a normal progression of an artist. These are just all over the place. This is like he just grabbed ideas out of a bag.
Yeah. I just think, God, I can't recommend enough watching the Scorsese film of the Rolling Thunder Review, because it's just you get such a sense of who he is. He still remains a mystery, but you get to see all the kind of a sense of why he's a mystery. And the live performances are just absolutely incredible. One more cup of coffee in particular, but which is from Desire. And the people that it's just an incredible band. The only thing that I can think of that equates with it would be the Joe Cocker Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour. Just these incredible musicians, and it's like there's so many people, and it's like, how did anybody get all these people come onto a stage and play together at the same time? How do you do that? It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I definitely need to check it out. I'm writing it down on my list that I will inevitably forget about until the next time you bring it up.
I mean, the only thing I can compare it to is the kind of concerts that that Parliament, Funkadelic, and Earth, Wind, and Fire were giving back in the day, where you had 15 to 20 musicians on stage, all playing together at the same time. It's just, for me, I get such a gas out of that, watching that kind of musicianship where everybody is just in sync with everybody and knows where everything is supposed to be, and yet there's still this jazz sense of improvisation, like anything can happen, and everybody could drive off a cliff at any given moment. That's what these kinds of concerts feel like to me, and I love that. I love that in a concert. Nothing makes me more excited at a concert, but the sense that the musicians are basically living on the edge and just playing at the top of their game, and they're not afraid to go anywhere, even if that anywhere might be a disaster. I'm sorry. I'm drinking. I'm sorry.
Sorry, that was so energetic that I wasn't like, I needed to give it space afterwards to see if it like, because
Makes sense.
that was so we are coming up on an hour here, so I want to make sure, was there anything that anybody wanted to bring up specifically? I feel like we could have dived deeper into this by going song by song, but that feels like it would take like hours upon hours. So do you recommend this album to people?
Oh, fuck yeah. Obviously. I'm sorry, Beckett, I cursed again.
But Beckett, would you recommend this album?
It's okay to say no.
I don't know. I mean, it's not my thing, and I'm just not a big folk music person in general. So,
Would you recommend this album, Rebecca?
To the right person. I think it is
um,
an album that you do have to pay attention to, and that somebody interested in the craft. I don't think I would recommend it to my husband, who doesn't have an interest in songwriting, but I would recommend it to my friend Paul, who does have an interest. So
if I think if you're interested, if you're a reader and you like literature and poetry, there are several volumes that contain Dylan's lyrics, and I would highly recommend, if maybe the albums are too much of a stretch for you, go in and read his lyrics, because they're just I think he's in a class by himself. I can't even say, well, there's this guy who writes songs and this woman who writes songs. I think the only person who comes close to him as a lyricist is Joni Mitchell.
I think that's fair. And if you don't believe Tim, that this is for literature, just remember that he won the Nobel Prize for literature.
Yes.
So
I do appreciate literature.
So
his lyrics are very readable. I've done it, and it's a different experience to read those lyrics without the music there.
I think that's true. I think you could read through this album and get a lot of the same emotions. I think that's just the way his lyricism works. They are coherent in saying the same thing, but I think you could get the vibe with one or the other.
It's you mentioned the Nobel Prize, and I was thinking about Kendrick Lamar, who won the Pulitzer, and yet reading his lyrics, and this might be both generational and cultural. I find I actually get more out of Kendrick Lamar when I read his lyrics, because I can sit there and concentrate on them, but they're nowhere as accessible to me as reading Dylan's lyrics.
Yeah, I think with Kendrick Lamar, it's a very specific experience of life. So that may or may not be relatable to people outside of that, world.
At the same time, it's a great way to get a sense of what of the experience of people who come from that culture, which is one of the things that I love about Kendrick Lamar is that um, he takes you into that place in such a way that you can. He's not as vivid in terms of picture a lyricist as Dylan is, but if you take the time to do the work, you get a visual representation, I think, of what and an emotional representation of what life for I can't think of a good creative acceptable way to say this, but I will say what it's like for Black people who live in that particular place. And by place, I mean a larger, I don't mean a particular location, but in terms of atmosphere and upbringing and growing up and of being Black in America at the time. But it's definitely a lot. But Kendrick's lyrics are definitely a lot of work, I think, for a white person in a way that Dylan's lyrics are far more accessible.
Well, one of them is more social commentary, which my understanding is a lot of Bob Dylan's earlier stuff before this is a lot of social commentary, and this is more emotional based. So it's a different level of relatable.
Yeah.
My
Dylan gets to that place in the next album on Hurricane, which is very much a social justice lyric. So if you listen to Nothing Else on Desire, I highly recommend you listen to Hurricane and One More Cup of Coffee as well.
Yeah.
So I had one last thought that might be the alcohol talking, but I find it funny. At the bottom of my screen, I see everyone's name, and under Bob Dylan's picture is Rebecca. So it looks like his name is Rebecca.
Weird. On that note, it sounds like we've exhausted our Bob Dylan talk for the evening, so I am going to close out the conversation.
You're an interesting looking dude, Rebecca.
I keep my hair long now, but
you should curl it.
If I cut it
You
short,
guys have
it will.
a similar face shape.
It's the jawline.
All right, so I am going to end the stream for the night. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I hope to catch you on the next one.
Yeah.